Let us know when you actually officially start, 'cause
Okay.
then we'll be quiet.
All right. So say something else.
Oh, you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Uh, I'm going to talk to you about my family and some of them, what I remember about them. And so I'll take up my daddy's family first.
Okay.
Okay, my daddy's family were people who came from England and settled in North and South Carolinas. They were not called that at that time. They were just people that came. And so my Bowen family originated someplace in our country that in Maryland, and so we know that they came into this country from the Maryland stuff, but we never have been able to make a contact there. All right, when we do, we know that it will be Bowen, and that was the beginning of the Bowen family. All right, then on the other side, there's the Ferguson family, and they came by boat from uh, from uh, from the boat was from Ireland, but they had come across till they had uh, oh what shall I say there? They were from a clan. They were from a clan, and the clans, the clans, as as we know them today, are pretty much the same thing. We were just changed by things that came along, and and the uh, clans were people who took took each other together, and they decided on a certain piece here and a certain piece there, and then they went around from each other, and maybe that maybe we knew about that about in the six 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 hundred about 600 miles from one end to the other.
So they divided up the land.
They divided up the land, right? That's exactly what you said. And the clans, the clans, were so uh, close to each other, and so it got to the point where they fought each other, and they wanted to have more land to have that, and so they they had they had clothing. They had fabric of some kind that they would end up keeping, and their clans would make the uh, make the clans belong to this one set of people, and they became very uh, nasty with each other. They didn't like what one did, didn't like what another one, and they had
When you say the fabric, you mean like a clan emblem?
a clan.
Or like a outfit?
You could have a clan emblem, and then you could have that, and the women would weave this stuff in their houses and make it what we look today. So like Joey, we might make him something in the something in a clan that had blue and white in it, or something else, and so uh, their clans had all this featured stuff, and they lived here and here and here. Now, what happened? The ones in England wanted more land, so they had more uh, fighting stuff than anybody else, and so they chased the chase chased the clans out of where they were living. The English ran them away. And so, for that reason, they had to leave Scotland and come to this country. And our people came from the clans.
Okay.
And the Ferguson clan and the
The
Bowen, the Bowens were not clansmen. That was just,
Oh.
they were just they were just on pretty much like that things
They
were.
were colonists.
Yeah, pretty like things were. So that brought them to this country, though, and so the in the meantime, we had the people in England and all around in that area, which had heard of this new country and this new way of life, and so they had that and got in with the Klansmen and came to this country to settle this country. Well, they came to this country from the king. The king in England gave them so much land that the king had. All right, and so the king never went there himself, or the king or the woman, and but they had heard about all this fine land, and so the king would say, "I give you so many thousand, not dollars yet, but of stuff that house, yeah, gave them land, and so they might wind up with 6,500 acres of land. They had something, and so they sent their people who were helping them and who liked certain people. They give them this clump of land, they give them this clump of land, and the king never saw it, but he had control of that, and so that came up and down the East Coast. Now, along with that same time, the Bowens were up in Maryland, and to get here to our place, we would have had to have something along the course, along the land there, and they kept their land, and as they kept their land, they kept other people who took care of them, who we would say they made slaves out of them, and from a trade that went up and down the coast from Maryland through South Carolina. Now, is this what you want?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So in North and South Carolina, they had good land, good pieces of they had they had similar people going up and down the coast, because the things, the wet stuff they had would go inland, and after a while we got all this big chunk of people, and in our case we spoke mostly of North and South Carolina. Now, North and South Carolina can be along the coast waters, and because they had that, they had food to eat from catching the fish and doing the fish, and then they had the Indians were close to our people, and they made good people with the Indians. They made.
So now you're saying the Bowen and the Ferguson clans had come to North and South Carolina.
Yes.
And they were mainly along the coast.
At the first, they were on the coast. And
that's where everything was. That's where the boats and the
yes,
food was and everything.
right, all of that. And then long as these people who were the rich they weren't called rich ones, but they had the most stuff and they had the most people working for them, and that was the long. And of course, they had things that took them off, like Blackbeard and the pirates and all that took them along the land and took things from them. All right, now as time went on, you had connections, and you would get in small groups and help each other. All right, and then the Indians had shown them how to make good food in that part of the family. And they showed them how to do other different other things at the same time. And then the English people became very popular along the coast, and with their knowledge, they could go inland to where they could get more money for themselves. And so as they did this, they came in groups, and you had people, you had people along the coast that learned how to do lots of things that the English had done, plus the one the Indians and the others have done. Now they began to help each other, and they had places like that were they had people who went into the work and showed each other how to do, like if they wanted to build a house, they showed them how to cut the pieces, how to cut the pieces so they would have more in the new land, and how they could be seated in a different direction to be more helpful. And so here we are at time maybe in what we would now call Virginia. And as we now call Virginia, things began to get better and better, and they left the lower parts of South Carolina for whatever part they wanted.
So they've moved back up now.
They're moving back up and doing.
So did they go away from the coast at this point? So are they moving back
no,
up?
they just added other people along with the coast.
Okay, so now they've moved up and joined the community.
That's right. Reached up and joined the community and all that. And as they did this, they began to be people who were well in one little clump. Like they would know more about how to do something for the land and have it so it would be in a cluster. And the Indians of another kind came along, and they didn't like this new group that was coming in, and so they had to be careful and watch them. And as their family grew, they would grow farther inland. Like here we are tonight talking about somebody that came across the river. The river came down from either the bigger rivers would come all together and empty into the ocean. Okay, and then that ocean is still going to stay pretty much like it is because they have something to eat, something to dress, and something to be that would come our way.
So the major communities stayed by the ocean.
Right.
But few, like close knit communities went west
Right,
to get further inland. Okay.
right. And
Now, so when you said the Fergusons went up to Virginia, like up along the coast, and then into Virginia with these this close knit group, and left the major communities behind, they had to watch out for the Indians because now they were starting to go onto their land, which they
yeah,
didn't want.
uh-huh.
Okay.
All right, so then the Fergusons, we don't have any record. Most of these things we have records of people, but we don't have records of the Ferguson people who were more than Fergusons. Our part were Fergusons in with this other part.
So you don't have records of the whole community, just the Fergusons and the.
Yeah, we can. They'll be divided in their own and go from there. Ours came off in Wilmington. In Wilmington, they had come across the ocean in a car that looked about the size of this one and had about 40 people. They were bringing to get off at a certain place.
So they came across in a ship that was about the size of this
Yeah.
house? Okay.
Yeah.
So this room's probably about maybe 30 feet? How wide would you say this room is from that wall to that wall?
Which wall?
That wall, 30? 30? Okay.
About 30 feet.
About 30 feet?
Let's see. Get you from now to, let's see. Here's, okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, so anyway, here you are, you have come inland, and you have people in clumps that worked with each other, and so then as they came from England, though, as we worked for the Fergusons, they came from Scotland, and Scotland is close to Ireland, and so they got on a boat and came with their families. Now, at first they just came with the men,
The men. Okay.
and
So
then
the
they
men
brought
were
their
the
families.
ones who landed in Maryland and came down.
They're Bowens.
So the Bowens are in Maryland.
Bowens in Maryland. They come down to North Carolina, and
the Fergusons came down
from Scotland.
from Scotland, but do you know where they landed from Scotland?
They landed in Wilmington.
Okay, so the Fergusons landed in Wilmington.
Landed in Wilmington, but we don't have a record of them because the clan and their people, the Fergusons, had things for people to do as they came, and they had people in the trips where the English ran them out. They had the whole clan, and out of that they had one man who was responsible for putting all this information in the car. And when the English ran them out and sent some of them to North Carolina, some of them to other parts of North Carolina, and then going on, say, to the Catawba River out here. Here you are at the Catawba River. How you going to get across?
Yeah.
All right, the way they knew where they were going because they had kinfolks who had already gone there,
Okay.
and so they were coming in our place. They're coming to get with that group, and that group is now approximately somewhere around Pinehurst, but Pinehurst did not come into time as Pinehurst. It waited for a better time.
Okay.
And okay, so here you are, and you're getting off in Wilmington, and they didn't have you down because the only people who had a list were the people who signed up when they left Scotland to come to North Carolina. All right. How they did it, they'd sign up something, say they had a place here. Now, what we've done, we've come from the middle of England to Scotland to Ireland, and they're on a boat in Ireland coming from Scotland to come to this country. You follow that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here they are. They have come from this is one of my things that doesn't come right. But they got off the boat in Wilmington. All right. They had to go inland to get with who they wanted. All right. They got a mule on the side of the boat, off beside the boat.
So
The
so
pe-
they
the
bought one
The
once
pe-
they landed.
Once they landed,
They bought
they
it.
they went up the river, and they got up there by a boat that helped run, and it posted it.
So
And
there was someone with a boat who was taking people up from the beaches.
right,
So you pay to have someone take you up. Okay.
yeah, and you had enough food that has come with them, and is saving that food now, and they built little fires at a place in the boat, and they would eat that from the boat, and when they got they had something to eat, all kind, and so when they got farther up the river, have to get off, and from there they just went in a group on up to close to where the kinfolks were going to be, and so at that point the Fergusons are more than the Bowens, because they were the Bowens were not quite as well done. That would take another long time to tell you about this. Okay, so here they are. They're along the river that has come from up above in here. And so as time went on, you had friends and neighbors and people to make a group there. And let's just take one example, the Presbyterian Church. The Presbyterian Church, they got their church probably 15 miles from us right now. And the man who brought them over, I have to think about his name, but he was the first one to cross the river and to come over here where he had land, and so at that time they could still start doing all their land.
So the king gave the person in the church land in the New World and here
Yeah,
to establish a church here.
to establish the church here, and as time went on, and say a long time, the Presbyterian Church was taken every 10 miles, he was taking a new church, so that if you had a buggy and a horse, you could take your family to church and be anywhere from where you lived, you could go there. And so that was sort of a landmark in the early days.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
And it was one man who the king sent over to run all of the churches? So he
No,
appointed-
the king wasn't running the churches till they got scattered up. I'll go back with you this and correct things that we have, and but anyway, that made the churches popular. You still had the Episcopal Church that had come from England, and you still had some of that. And then as the Lutherans came down from Philadelphia, then you had the Lutheran Church. Now, you may want to do some other church thing, but this is one that I just was talking about a couple of days ago. And so they came, and so the Germans then came. In the meantime, and all of this stuff was going on, you were having. We'll stop anytime you want to. Okay. We, I say we the people in our family, we went on the Fergusons and came and they stayed pretty much generally in the vicinity of Pinehurst, and Pinehurst was something that a place that got a lot of people to come down and make it a good place, and they brought thinking that the Pinehurst area was good because there was a lot of tuberculosis at the time, and so that was a good place to help it at that time. All right, then as in my family, then through the Bowens, I have had gotten on down to their people who got a job and stayed there, and then in the where am I? in the Bowens who came into this area where we have this creek and this place and people who crossed it and came over and established places. Well, we're in Catawba County now. All right, in Catawba County, the German people who came to get land were, they didn't change much. They were very fine people. Held on to their traditions, and the upper part of the county is mostly German. And then you come down to the lower part of the county, that's us. We were here closer to anybody, and so they stayed that side, and we stayed in our side.
Okay. And they mostly spoke German in the upper part of the county.
That's right, because they could keep records, because they knew how to read and write.
Okay.
See, the Scottish ones had just had that one main man, and they came over. When they came over, it was bad because England had written them out, and so now we're back in the middle, though, where we have Catawba County, and the man has come across the within five days of where we're sitting right now, that he came across the river.
5 miles. Okay.
Okay. I'll tell you his name when it comes to him in just a minute. Okay, so we are. We're sitting in this room, and we are within 5 miles of the main people who came across the river to establish us. And Robert Barkley is the second one. The first one is Robert Barkley. Anyway, we had tell me. I'll come back to that. Anyway, we are here. You know, just think about it. We're here within 5 miles of your ancestor, and he had land in here, and then other people came and they had land and made this area where we are right now, and and we know where these other people have come from in general, in general. And as time goes on, you'll want to figure them out. So, in our case, uh, my grand my mother was let's see, now she'd be a little over 100 years old of me, and my daddy was the way we got to this county. My daddy got a job in this county. His family was in lower south, lower. He went back and forth across the North Carolina and South Carolina line, and then they had a by this time there were people around who had the slaves were about gone. The slaves were about gone, and so the new kind of two kind of their living. It was not unusual to see people who of the white race, and they had that, and they'd have large chunks of large chunks of land, I say, and so they would take each other together. There'd be a man who had money and ways to make money and ways to make other stuff. They had other men who didn't want to do that, but they would go as the second one, and he would take care of all the farmland, and at the end of the year they would divvy up the money.
So the businessmen would have connections with multiple farmers.
Yes.
Who would farm, and then the business owner would make money and split it with the farmers in return for, I guess,
Yeah.
a share of the crops.
A share of the crop, right?
Okay.
And so they had my ancestors in the Bowen group were considered the top of the person.
They're the business
Of the business. He would the banker would stay in there and take care of the money. The person of my descent knew all about farming and how to make good use of farming and all of that, and so the two of them would get together, and they would live off this money that they had coming in, and so they had children who I'm getting closer and closer now. They had children who lived in this small place in what's the county? Lineburg. No. I'll come back to that. You keep that, and I'll get these things because they'll come to me. Moore County, and Ark. Ark. Okay. We'll leave that now. I'll tell you what they did. But that was my granddaddy Bowen, and they did not have the bank. They had the man who ran the farm, and they had about 400 acres of cotton, mostly cotton, and so he took care of that, and his family all jumped in to help part of them, and it's sort of odd to think that it would happen, but they had 7 children, and only one of them did not go to college of some kind.
Wow.
and and you know, in this day and time,
Yeah, that's pretty
and I'll tell you which ones they were. My daddy was the uh, my well, his sister was the main one who did not go to any kind of college, and my daddy was next, and he took a business kind of school, where the where uh, what's what's now a military school, and that's where that's in close to close to close oh who from Greensboro out to the it's about 10 miles from this place that's a military now, but my daddy went to as a business school, which was just opening up, that letter saying business school.
Okay. And now the education back then, was it still grades 1 through 12, or how did that work?
Oh no, it didn't have
It wasn't like
creeds for a long time.
that. So was it just you grew up receiving an education from a schoolhouse, and you just
Well, that was they still had the big farm down, and we tried to figure out how he got to Greensboro, but we think that it was by train, because at that time you had a lot of trains coming and going, and it would have been easy to get from Greensboro down to down to the lower part of the county. And then the war came along, the war of the First World War, and so then he joined the war from there till it ended. He was in Virginia somewhere when the war ended, so he never got overseas. He was trained, but up to that time, when he would come in to see my mother, he'd have to go to a horse and buggy, and you'd take that to where he was going to court my grandmother, and then he'd have to take it back the next day and get on something and go to Laurinburg. So we'll go back over a lot of this stuff.
okay.
So anyhow, then he had never learned to drive, and so he learned to drive by being in the Army in World War One, and so then that was over, and then he went. He and my mother went back to what is now close to Pinehurst, and what he did then, he had a store that was close to where they were building the things on Pinehurst, and they were building a new store out that way, and a new building. What would I call it? Well, they had to have a little store, and so they stayed there till the big the stayed there till they had no store anymore, because they didn't build a store. What?
Would it be the Great Depression yet?
What?
Was it the Great
Yeah, the
Depression?
Great Depression. The
Okay.
Great Depression was coming along right then, and so they lost their store, and then that's when they got a job in getting toward Gaston County,
Okay.
and
Now, do you know why they lost their store? If it was
Yeah,
like people weren't buying their
We're buying it more that.
buying thing, but
the-
they weren't in the like market or anything like that.
No, no, no. They just had a small store,
Mm-hmm.
and these people were coming into Moore County
Mm-hmm.
and taking over.
Oh, so
A lot of these
there were rich
things.
people buying up the.
They were buying small places.
Mm-hmm.
That was an area that had a lot of tuberculosis,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what first started. Now, Pinehurst is the one that started helping get people better in health wise, and then they went from there back down to my granddaddy's Bowen's house. Well, the Bowens still were doing good, and my daddy and his family, they knew how to farm and get money and keep money and work hard. And in the meantime, the Bowens were getting a good crop in good crop in Lineburg, not Lineburg, that's not it, but it's close. But anyway, back in the other county in
More.
not Moore,
Yeah. Not Moore County then.
not Moore County. It's Line. Oh, I'll come back to that. Hmm.
Gaston?
No,
Not yet.
not yet. And so anyhow, down there they were going strong on the farm, and the big farm, and so what you had to do with them was try to get cotton as something to take you through the summer and into the next winter. And so the way they had operated, this would be a little bit back, but it'd come back. Granddaddy, we'd go to their house. We had a car by that time from Gaston County, and we'd go to visit. And Granddaddy still had horses and mules and other things, and then Granddaddy his boys would work too, and then he was going a good way. That they had he was one of the main people in the county, and he had these children that were good children. And I didn't finish telling you about them. I told you about one, that Daddy was one, and then his sister, Aunt Mary, she went into Raleigh, I think, and she went to a boarding school of some kind, and that was considered a college for that time. And then she, after Mary, they had a couple children that were born during that time, and health things would have made their lives lots of times. And so then Granddaddy, this was the thing, they'd get up early in the morning and go to the store, not to the store, but to the their way of doing. They got real early in the morning, and they were farming. They were farming there, and it got so hot, so Granddaddy would quit about 11 o'clock in the morning, and he'd get the mules or whatever else was there, had women too, and he'd take them to the lake, and he'd take them to, they had ponds and all along, and so he would take the whole family there, and Grandma would have a dinner fixed for them. They'd have a picnic out there, and all the family except Grandma would go in the water, and Granddaddy taught them to swim, to swim. You know how he did? He was an excellent swimmer, and he'd throw the boys in the creek and tell them to swim to him. and if they couldn't, he could go after them. But then he always said he couldn't do the girls like that, so he would get the girls in the swimming pool, and then she would climb up on his back, and he would get on his back and paddle with this girl till he helped her. And so none of us know when we learned to swim, because we learned so early. And I of course, you can tell I haven't done it for a long time, but anyway, all right. Now then, we're back in where we're in here, and so we got here, and so this was a good textile place, and so we had things that were good for people to have, and we had a car. It's an old car of some kind, I know now, but people couldn't get to town. People couldn't get to town, and the people who had things to sell would go to these people in the town around. Nobody had television, and nobody had any of that. And so then sometime after that, that Daddy got a job with the Prudential Life Insurance Company, and we had a good life then. And so my mother and Daddy had built a little house, and they were going to do fine, and he made $100 a week one time, and everything else was way below that. And so then,
what year would that have been? Do you know?
what year would that been? Okay.
Or who was president at the time?
Who was? Oh well, they that was part of what happened to him. But he was doing well till he got sick. But anyway, he got a more manual job, and then he people would ask him who he's going to vote for, and at first he wouldn't tell them, and then he said he hadn't decided yet. So it came a time that he was working for this company. Well, he was working for somebody who worked for the company that held prisoners. Prisoners was up the road from where we lived, and he told them that he was going. They all wanted him to grow to have not Republican. This was one of those companies at that time that if you had something that was good for you, and you liked this guy over here, but he's not going to vote like you did, they'd just fire you that day, just go home. And that's what happened to him. And then he was going to vote for Al Smith. Was Al Smith? Al Smith was the Democrat. All right, so he wasn't going to vote for him. He was going to vote for Hoover. Yeah. He was going to vote for Hoover. Yeah. Okay. So.
It would have been 28 because Hoover only went one term. Did he go two? I think he went one. I may be wrong. Yeah.
Who do you think?
I think it would have been in the year 28.
Oh, okay. Right. I don't know about that.
Because FDR
but
came in 22. Hoover, I don't think Hoover would have had the.
Well, see, I didn't think the Hoover bill came in until the second term, but I could be wrong about that.
I'm not sure. I haven't looked that up in a while. Okay, so then here we were. We had a nice little store started that was going to be really good for our family, and that then Daddy would be sick, and you wouldn't know what was wrong with him. He'd just lie down and go to bed, and nobody knew what was wrong with him, and so then finally he lost his good job. I checked those things backwards. I had you in one place and him in another. Okay, so then I was in the 6th grade, and my uncle, who lived in Florida, he and his wife had wanted to have children so bad, and she kept having miscarriages, or a baby would come along and it'd live 3 days or something like that. And I'm convinced if it would be this day and time, what we have now would just be nothing. They'd just give her some kind of help, and she would have lived the baby would have lived all those times, the babies. And so the Uncle Dick wanted to see his parents at that time, and she wasn't able to drive, and so this uncle of mine then had received something from the federal government to starters, that they would give them so much money, and so he got one of those and that set him up to be a farmer in Florida. Okay. Now then, we were at Daddy came home. He was sick. Uncle Dick asked Daddy and Mama if maybe they would let me go to Florida with Aunt Edith, because she was so upset about things. I was ready to go anywhere. So I went, and they changed schools, so they didn't know what to do with me. They had the 12th grade down there, but I was just in the 11th grade here at that time. And so after they talked to me a little while, they put me up to the 12th grade. Well, and that was an interesting school too. That was different, and I'll tell you about that later. I'm just giving you a second. All right, okay, so we're back up to. I was homesick after school. I stayed 2 or 3 times, and then I went back home. And then when I came home, well, Daddy was sick, and the boys had all the things that you have in children, like
they got vaccinated?
Only thing they got vaccinated by at that time was oh gosh. Smallpox, yeah, we had smallpox, and then we had another. What would we be next? Oh, yeah, whooping cough. We had nothing against that, and and then from all that came later, too, and then. And then we had. Let's see, Daddy got a job driving a truck. He had learned to drive in the Army, and he drove a truck that was away from home, and then come home on weekends, and then after that they were they had moved to Dallas, and the people who owned the place wanted to come home, and so we had to find a place to live. Well, Nana was looking at after Daddy had been sick and all, then she had been had a job with a cotton mill, and she was always a good person to do, and she did her best to do and try to raise, but Daddy wasn't able to do anything, and he didn't. Had gone to different doctors and all, and they never could find out what was wrong with him, and so he went somebody came along that were veterans, and they had veterans in Charlotte, so they
Veterans Hospital.
they what
Veterans Hospital.
veteran no they didn't have a veterans hospital at that time, but it was a doctor in one of the buildings in Charlotte, which wasn't much, and so anyway, the people ran into him, and he left what he had, and that got killed, and so that was the end of my father, and then my mother had three children to raise, and she did that quite well, with not having. She was very good to handle her money, handle her children, and we had a good life. It was not it was not good in money, but it was good in people with you. And then after that, World War II came along, and World War II was better for all of us. And then Basil Whitener was he was the youngest man he was the youngest man in the legislature at that time. His family lived up the road from us, and his sister got Basil to see if she could get some that I could get some college somewhere. And so the only place it was this was something Roosevelt had done. Roosevelt had something that allowed college people or their people in town at that time to get college, and so mine was at Sacred Heart, which was when I hit something that starts with a W, I can't say it. I have about 4 things like that I can't say. That's that, thing that I have. Anyhow, Basil was the youngest man in the legislature at that time, and so he took me down there, and his sister took me down there. The what?
Down to Sacred Heart.
Down to Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart was it was an old college that had been there quite a while. The Sacred Heart was the girls' college, and they did not get together at that particular time. Catholic school. And I went home that day. Basil's sister had taken me down there to show me and to introduce me to these people. And I went home, and my mother was in the back yard. She was scrubbing clothes. And when I told her that they were going to give me a Catholic girl and I thought she'd just be tickled to death. Well, she just cried like a baby. It was good that she was going to get some, but she hated Catholics, and she didn't want me to go